I have talked far too long, but I did want to give you a little background on our work and as an organization. And so I would love to just have some conversation now about anything that you've heard here and any questions that come up, or how we can carry this conversation on a little bit further. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of help is Lutheran Immigrant Organization helping to South Texas with the Hispanics coming across? Something more relevant for us.
Yes, ma'am. And I know they're working primarily through Refugee Services of Texas, which is an affiliate of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. So LRS uses, because they're kind of normally they're kind of the parent group that is working on all this at the national level. And then their arms and legs in Texas are Refugee Services of Texas and Upbring. I know Refugee Services of Texas is doing more of the refugee and immigrant work. Upbring is working directly with the unaccompanied minors and helping to house them until they can be connected to their families. So those are some of the things that are happening right in your backyard that LRS is directly involved in. But they do that through, and as a matter of fact, Chris, who will be here, and I'm sure she'll talk a whole lot more about that, will when she's here in a couple weeks, has been down to the border a couple of times to help broker some of this work and to help make sure that we're doing what we can do to help.
So is that 6-month program in working in Texas, where you put them up in a hotel apartment?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you're doing that right here in Texas, mostly through Refugee Services of Texas. Yes, ma'am. That's happening right now. And there's opportunity. We have a LRS, I keep saying we, but it's our network. We have a program called Circle of Welcome. So it's where a church or a civic group or a single person can essentially adopt one of those families and say, we would like to do that work and adopt that family. So you might help find them that apartment. You might be the ones that cook them that first meal. You might mentor the children or provide a little transportation until they get on their feet. So we have that program going on. It's called Circle of Welcome. And I would encourage you to reach out to Refugee Services if that's something that this church or any of you want to be a part of. But it's a great way. A caseworker can't do all this. I mean, if you really want to welcome somebody into this country and make them a Texan, in your case, or a Carolinian, then you really have to surround them with this community. And that has worked just tremendously well. And we still have people in the Carolinas that are extremely close and talk and call their Hmong friends their family because they've kept up with them for these 40 years that they've been keeping up with the same families because they welcomed them when they came here, and that's what I mean by the LRS long welcome because that welcome lasts that long in many cases. Some people get on their feet and move on. And that's great. I got this now. I'm safe. I know how the system works. And I got me a new job in the next town. Thank you for your help. And it's great to see people flourish in that way all over this country. And I will also add, because it's so important right now today, is we're in such desperate need for direct care workers, for entry-level staff from farms, construction, go to a restaurant, any restaurant, and eat, and folks can't find enough help to do the job, and all of a sudden, because we also have employment specialists that find employment for these folks and help them get a job. And now we have companies calling us saying, can you please send me some more of those good refugees or immigrants that you're housing, because I'm dying here. I need help. And it's always been the immigrant population in this country that has started at the bottom, started with those entry-level jobs, whether it's on the farm or in construction, and then work their way up into our society and become a part of our society. So now more than ever, we now have employers that are calling us because our folks have been vetted to the point, and they can pass a criminal background test because they had to get in the country. They passed a drug test, and they're hard workers. And gosh, to have that in this day and age in the United States is like the Holy Trinity. So we actually have a lot more support now, and that's where a lot of this is becoming a lot less political than it's ever been before, because we all need workers. And so it's not as much a political issue as it used to be, because now some of the biggest folks in some of the biggest red states are saying we've got to have help or our economy's going to, well, it's already suffering from lack of those entry-level workers. Other questions? And feel free to disagree or to share a different view of this. It's not a one-way street, and we certainly don't have all the answers. Yes, sir.
You've spoken about some of the unaccompanied minors that are coming into the country. How on earth did you begin to figure out who they're related to and getting them to families and stuff like that? Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, and I'm not really the expert on that, but I'll tell you what our experience has been in Colombia, where we have this little program for 24. So when some of these children are taken into our care in the border as a country, and then the federal government says, okay, Lutheran Services Carolinas has, or Upbring, let's keep it closer to home. Upbring has a shelter that can take 40 of those children. And so those children are put in our care to take care of. And sometimes they might not be there but 2 or 3 days, because as soon as they come into the country, our caseworkers, the federal government's caseworkers, start working. They might have a note in their pocket or a telephone number in their pocket, or and that's a lot of the way that at least ours. There's been those identifiers. Somehow there's been an identification there. Now, it doesn't always happen, but almost in every case, ours are really pretty quick. I mean, it might be 2 days, which is very inefficient. You know, you've only had the child for 2 days, but all of a sudden they've unearthed an aunt in Atlanta, and we drive or fly the child down to Atlanta. So we've not had any that have stayed in our care more than probably 4 or 5 months. Now, I'm sure there are others in some of these bigger facilities, and I suspect they keep them probably closer to the border if they don't have any hope of finding, their families. And I suspect they keep them pretty close. So they're probably sending us the ones that have they say it's just a matter of time before we can hook all these things together. Other comments or questions?
A question on just kind of, we talked about, you mentioned, people coming in, and then it's part of the LIRS program to help them get, a job or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about the skills that some of these people may already have, and what that's, how attractive is that to certain groups?
It's kind of sad, because one of the first refugees that I met when I came to work with Lutheran Services, one of the first refugees I met was a college professor from, I think, Iraq. And it was very sad, because he had written a couple of books, and he was a college professor, but over here, none of that translated into, he was not going to be able to get a job here, or at least it was going to take a long time. So he was going to have to start in a very menial job until he could either make the contacts or get his transcripts and his documentation and apply for a job as a college professor or whatever. And so it's sad that a lot of these folks do have to start, pretty low. Now, it's also true that a lot of these folks speak English. I mean, they may have worked for the U.S. government in Afghanistan or wherever they were. So they've obviously got a leg up and might have administrative skills, to be able to go into an office type setting. But a lot of times we're bringing people in at those very entry-level jobs. So the people that we work with, primarily our job coaches that work with these folks, might work with them for, well, actually right now, we're working with our American Healthcare Association because there is a terrible shortage of direct care workers in all healthcare. And a lot of these folks, matter of fact, we just were talking about this the other day, and one of the new refugees had done that kind of work in their home country. And so all of a sudden it was their chocolate and our peanut butter might make something a lot better for all of us. We have a painting contractor in Raleigh, North Carolina, that will hire every refugee we send his way, because you don't have to know English to paint. And his business has boomed because of that, because he can put somebody to work about day one. And again, it's hard work, and it's not what maybe they were used to in where they came from. But again, these are such hard workers, they've been able to just jump right in. So he's one, for instance. Convention centers. You think of all the, and hospitality, all those server type positions that we need all over this country, in every location. So those are the kind of jobs that they might start with, and then they're back in school, or they're working their way up the ladder. And it just amazes me how quickly they go from that entry-level position to, I met a guy that now owns his own, he's a whiz at car repair. And now he has his own business repairing automobiles because as soon as people found out how good he was, he had more work than he could possibly handle. So again, resiliency is just amazing with this group. If you face death, this is a cakewalk. Yes, sir.
Our southern border, I would imagine the majority of the people that we have coming is immigrants, but the refugees and stuff like that, fleeing political violence or that kind of persecution, where are they coming from? Which countries are seeing an influx of that?
At the southern border, which again I know is a lot closer for you all, so that's of greater interest to you. I would say probably the ones that are coming to that border that are asking for asylum, that say I've had to flee my country to keep from being killed, and the United States is willing to let me in. Honduras and Guatemala are two of the top 10, and then Venezuela is another country that has had so much strife, and a number of those folks are coming too. But I think it'd be interesting. I think the most asylees, I can barely say that word, last year were, I think Venezuela was first, because there had been so much unrest and people had to flee for their lives. But Venezuela is the number one country for asylees coming to the United States right now, and China was number 2. And again, they're not generally showing up at the southern border, but they are finding other ways to get to this country, and then asking for asylum so they don't have to go back to China. And if you Google where do asylees come from to the United States, you can, it's amazing what you can find between the internet, between Google, and the other great resource is the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, and if you Google that website, there's just a tremendous amount of information about refugees and displaced persons all over the world. That's a good resource also. Yes, sir.
Funding. Where does a lot of the funding come from?
Good question. It's funny, for refugees, the United States government gives a certain amount of money to a refugee agency to help resettle that person in their location, wherever they're going to. But I mean, we're talking about a couple $1,000s, and then if there's more than one person, then there's a little add-on for each additional person. And I couldn't tell you exactly how much that is, but but it's not enough by any means, and it's not supposed to be. Then it's our job, and the refugee system is set up for groups like ours and for all of you, that we're going to make this happen on the ground. So it does depend on volunteers or those circle of welcome groups that say yes. I had a guy call me the other day and said, I'm willing to rent an apartment for somebody for 6 months. Tell me where to send the check, because he was so impacted by this whole story of refugees, especially the SIVs, and said, I had a guy that offered the nicest lake right outside of Columbia, South Carolina. He said, I have a house on the lake. I'll give it to you for a year. Just tell me, tell me when you want it. And that's great to have those offers, but then it takes our staff, our housing coordinators and our other folks to figure out, okay, if we put somebody in a house on Lake Murray, which is a very, very nice place, how are they going to get to any services? Because it's 15 miles out of town. And so it comes with its own set of problems. But that's our job, is to piece all those pieces together. I said, we can make it work. We'll give them Uber cards to get Uber into town when they need it. There's ways to do that today that we didn't have in the past. You had to be on the bus line. Now there are at least some other opportunities. So it really is a public-private partnership. But it's also on the immigrant, on the refugee themselves. One of the interesting pieces of this program, because the government wanted refugees to have some skin in the game also, that their plane tickets, they have to pay for their own airplane tickets to get here. Now, they probably don't have a dime to their name, but the government requires this. I mean, they want this as part of the system, so they have that skin in the game. So LIRS has essentially a bank that we loan them that money for their tickets. And, coming from overseas, for a family of 4, it might be a few $1,000s to get here. And then they set that up as a long-term, very low-interest loan that refugee might pay back over the next 6 months or 6 years. And so that way, public-private and the refugee has some skin in the game too. I suspect we're getting close on time. Yep, I'm seeing some heads shake. Yes. And I don't want to overstay my welcome, but I'm just. It's a thrill to be down here and to be able to share all the good work that's happening again all over the country, and especially right here in your backyard. And you will know how to get in touch with me if I can share more. And I get to do a little temple talk at church. And I decided I would do a completely different thing so you won't hear it twice. So thank y'all very much.